Welcome to another episode of Behind the Seams with George Courey. Today, we are so lucky to have Sarah Brobeck, President and CEO of ALM, joining us on the podcast today, remote. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you today. So why don't we start off by introducing yourself? Who are you and what do you represent?
Sure. Well, like you said, I'm Sarah Brobeck, President and CEO of ALM. I've been with the organization as a paid employee for 3 years, but I'm no stranger to the industry or to ALM. I started in the industry 20 years ago, and I was actually an operator. And so I've worked around the industry.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that. So I know you most recently, President and CEO of ALM, but before that, I didn't know that. So in operations, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I ran a healthcare laundry. And before that, 18 months before that, I started in like linen management, linen distribution, kind of a customer service role.
Okay.
And it's my story is so cliche, right? Like the old crotchety old man, right, that was running the laundry. He retired, and there were a lot of issues over there at our central laundry for this healthcare system. And they said, "Hey, you've done a great job. You have a business degree. Like, Let's run this laundry."
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, with 18 months of experience in basically customer service, right, healthcare, I found myself running a laundry, and we had this big, huge tunnel in the back that washed all our laundry, but it didn't take Tide.
Okay yeah, I remember so it's so funny you say that. I remember the first time that I was in an institutional laundry, and for people outside the industry, and we'll talk about a little bit when we talk about education a little bit later on in our conversation today, but I remember walking in the first time and I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, I think most people don't understand the industry that we live in and how important and vital it is to the inner workings of any healthcare or, frankly, many hospitality facilities across the globe, right? So I find that really interesting. Yeah.
And I did too. I loved it. We had a state-of-the-art facility. It was a small little facility, but it had just recently been renovated. But I had a huge support network, with within my healthcare system, but nobody knew anything about the laundry. So when I ran into laundry specific issues, with, the chemistry or productivity or bottlenecks, any of those things, I found myself kind of on an island.
Yeah.
And that actually was what first introduced me to ALM. I knew we were a member. And I'd had my textile provider at the time had his CLLM and actually taught me some things, that he had learned from that.
Sure.
And so I was looking at the training and thought, they have this thing called the Laundry College. Like that sounds kind of interesting. I think I need to go and check that out. And I did. And so I graduated through the college, I got my RLLD. And then I told Glenda Fairbanks, who was the executive director at the time, and told her, I said, Linda, I want to do more. Like, I want to be involved. And so then I started teaching others, So as I was learning and growing and building my own network and had mentors and support, from within my own industry, I then, started paying that forward a little bit and started teaching classes and volunteering and serving on committees. And then I actually started teaching at the Laundry College several years after that. And then served on the board for a little while. So I've been around for a long time, but I never really worked actually as a paid employee for the association, nor did I ever even really think that was really where my future was going to be. To me, I felt like completely unqualified when Linda was looking for a replacement in the board, was looking for a replacement for her when she retired. And so when they presented me with the opportunity, I was really taken back. But now I'm like, oh my gosh,
That's
like
it's
this
such an
is the most
awesome.
natural thing in the world.
Yeah, and such a natural progression for you too, right? Understanding and working at the base level within an institution, and from there growing up and realizing that holy crap, there's probably a couple things that are missing that I need to get educated on. And I think that is kind of what the mission and value is of ALM, right? Is that idea
Mhm.
and that concept, right?
It is
Yeah.
correct.
I wanted to talk a little bit, Sarah, if we can, about associations in general. And I know ALM definitely plays a huge piece of kind of the inner workings of all of the different associations. But talk to me about the way you see associations and how important associations are for our industry.
Yes, I think they're vital in every industry, but especially in ours because we're such a small little niche industry. And so are all of our associations. So
Hmm.
there's several different associations that focus on this commercial laundry side of textile care. And we all have our niche. We all do like there's crossover, right? But we all kind of
Absolutely.
focus in specific areas. Ours obviously is education, training, professional development.
Hmm.
But what you get from all associations is that community and that connection, right?
Yes.
It really kind of convenes people together that have diverse voices, right? From suppliers and operators, your veterans, your newcomers.
Hmm.
They all can, come together. They learn through networking, peer to peer, and discussions and instruction, and shared
Yeah,
experience,
I
right?
think
And it not only strengthens the individual, but it
100%.
strengthens the industry.
Absolutely. And I think the key word that you said there for me anyways is community and how important that is. And whether like take a, a page outside of our industry for a second and just look at, school, our kids growing up, or you look at anything else, sports, like building a community is so important, and having a place where people have common values, common interests, and really are trying to learn from each other to be the best professionals that they possibly can, I think is so important. I can think my best moments in this industry, I'm a decade into it already. And for me, my best moments come from these events that we have as a community, bringing people together. And I can't tell you how many new connections that I've made. And most importantly, just that ability to pick up the phone and say, hey, I don't know enough about this, but I bet you do, or you'll know someone who does. And I find that people are really open to having those discussions and educating kind of that next chapter. Yeah.
And they are,
Yeah.
and that's the reason I'm here today.
Mm.
If I had not found ALM and taken that leap to get myself, some training and education that was very laundry specific,
Yeah.
then I would have not been a successful operator. There's
Absolutely.
no way, right? And I would not have felt invested in it because a lot of like the going joke, and I'm sure you've heard it, is everybody always says like nobody intentionally goes into
Absolutely.
the laundry
100%.
industry.
That's right.
So for me, I was no different, right? Like I stumbled upon it. It was an opportunity for growth. I really thought that I was going to really stay on like the healthcare track and
Uh-huh.
and just continue to grow within leadership in healthcare.
Sure.
But then when I found ALM and I found my people,
Mhm.
these were like that. They became my go-tos, my mentors, right? The
That's right.
people that really helped me figure out how to run a good operation um, and it just felt way more natural, right, for
100%.
me to just kind of stay with my people. So when
Absolutely.
I
Stay
started
within the
looking for
community.
additional
Yeah.
opportunities, yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to stay in the industry,
Yeah.
and that is so much of what I still try to embody that with everything that we do within ALM. We
Mhm.
want people to be connected to build that network outside their employer,
Absolutely.
so that they have different perspectives, right? They have different people to call on whenever they are in need, or or when they want to look for a new opportunity.
That's right.
They know people who are connected
Absolutely.
outside of their own little organization that
That's
they're
right.
currently working
And
for.
if you combine that with the other element, which I know that you have a lot of thoughts on, which is the advocacy and the standardization that our associations kind of bring to the table, I think is hugely important, because I think all that links back to exactly what you were talking about, community, right? And being able to standardize, being able to have this common language that we're all speaking, that we then educate the final end user customer on, I think is so important. So what are your thoughts on that, both from an advocacy perspective and from just standardization?
Sure. So on advocacy, TRSA is the only association in our industry that formally, does advocacy efforts. And they do it really, really well. We 100% support them. An interesting thing, there's a lot of shift that's going on in the industry as a whole, but especially within the associations. We're all really starting to embrace coming together, right, in areas where we have commonalities and where we can support one another, because we realize that collectively, right, we are stronger
baby. That's
than
right.
we are right individually. And so one of the things that TRSA has done recently is they always have a legislative conference every year. And the last day of that conference, they do what used to be called like TRSA Hill Day, where all the participants of the conference can go over and actively lobby.
Correct.
It's a really neat, eye-opening experience. Joe invited me a couple of years ago and I went and I was like, oh my gosh, like we need to have access to this. Like our members need to be a part of this. Like they don't even know it yet, but they need to see it because it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And Joe was like, you know what? Why don't we just open it up to like all the associations that are applicable?
Absolutely.
And so last year we had the first ever Laundry Hill Day.
That's right.
And we had all of the associations that were there and represented, and they offered all of our members, right, member pricing for this event. And it was extremely powerful. And so that, first of all, I encourage you to go and to participate in that. Everybody needs to do it at least once. But it really showed me that the power of our voice, and that one person and one initiative, right, can really make a significant difference in our industry.
Absolutely. What's interesting, Sarah, if I can on that point, so not only is it happening in the US, but what TRSA has done, which I think is really cool, is they've also transitioned that now into Canada. So for the Canadian viewers out there, there is that arm that's now kind of working out, and we're building that muscle. And they've engaged some really interesting people in Canada to help with that effort as well. So it's really happening, really, as an industry, North American wide for us. So it's awesome. Yeah.
I think they're doing a lot in Europe as well. So,
agreed.
I mean, they're definitely getting out there. They're working on behalf of our industry. It's great. And we support that, right? And to be able to be a part of that, I think is really important. And it's a significant milestone, right, for where we are as an industry right now, when we're all coming together and collectively trying to advocate on behalf of the industry.
Absolutely.
As far as standardization and best practices go, that is something that is extremely important. And I think that, the associations kind of help foster the environment that makes that happen. The actual standards and best practices come from our members, right? So we as an association don't really set any of that. We just create the environment and help with the framework. So it's all industry driven, right? But everybody's always looking for, what is the best practice for this? How can I standardize this? And this is a place where you can come, right? And you're going to be able to have those types of conversations and get that information.
That's right. And when you kind of extend that into education, which I know we have a lot to talk about, so I want to get there. You look at, well, what an awesome opportunity as the new generation is coming through and getting educated to be able to have the same type of discussions, the same type of learning. And I've always said to any of our customers, I encourage them to get educated, because a better educated employee is going to provide better value back to the organization they're working for, and can make better decisions, because they really are armed with more than a touch and feel or a maybe, or this is how that guy did it once upon a time. It's now, well, wait a second, I've gotten myself educated. This is now across all of the network of laundries that we deal with. They're all kind of using the same type of practices, and it just becomes, that much more valuable. So Sarah, can you talk to me a little bit about like history of education And I don't know if you have that information, but like, what did it used to be? Because I have a feeling it was like, all right, you get the job. And if you're working in maintenance, man, you shadow a guy who's been there for 80 years and knows what he's doing. And, that is the way you learn. How has that kind of changed throughout the years? And can you kind of give us a little bit of a history of that?
Sure. I call that trial by fire.
Okay. Got you.
And that is definitely the way that I learned, right? I mean, you're drinking from a fire hose, really, and trying to figure everything out. And that is still kind of common practice, right? Especially with our leaders. You think about this. How many times do you know someone, or even have you been in this position yourself, where you have received a promotion, right? Because of the job that you currently did, right? Like you were an individual contributor, you did well at that. You were a task doer, a completer, right? And then you were all of a sudden transitioned into this leadership role, and everybody just thinks that you're just going to be able to, make that transition on your own.
Absolutely.
It's so difficult, right? We
100%.
don't give enough credit for that, because first of all, you're going from a doer to a leader of 100%. The doers.
Sarah,
right?
It's funny that you say that. Like for me, I was always picked because I was the only option. So like I didn't really have a lot of ability there, right? It was like, okay, well, there's this guy who's hanging around. He seems to be able to do the job, so let's just throw him into the world. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, right? That you're kind of just taking these individuals that like maybe could do the job and have done a really good job as being a doer, and now they have to all of a sudden be strategic, right?
Or you do a great job where you are, right? Like, and then all of a sudden you have this leadership title, right. And there's so many layers that go into it, right? Because what made you successful as an individual contributor is not going to define your success as a leader. And if we don't have those conversations, right, and help these new leaders learn how to communicate, learn how to make strategic decisions and think strategically, right? There's the financial aspect to it that they might not have, any former experience with. But delegating, communicating. One of the biggest ones that we often overlook is also part of that identity is going from a friend and a colleague to now you're a boss.
That's right. Because most
people.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
It's okay. There's just so many layers that are to it. And we still, here we are, like 20 years after I started my career, right? We're still doing that. And it's not just our industry. It's all over the place.
Absolutely.
Every industry. And so I think we have to look at it twofold, right? You have to train your teams on technical, right? You have to give them that common language. You need to have that foundation setting that goes on so that they can speak that common language. It's going to increase your productivity.
Yes.
It's going to, and I've got some stats here that we can, that I'll show you in a minute, but really investing in that, right, has so many powerful benefits. But when we also have to focus on those leaders too, right? And really put resources around them, give them a network. That's even beyond the scope of our own doors. Like we should want our leaders to get out there and have experience and exposure beyond what we do for them internally in our organization.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Sarah, because historically, I think people have typically viewed education as like skill-based technical training, and that like we need to invest in technical training for this individual. But I think that there's so much more, especially as you continue to level up in an organization and going from someone who had no direct reports to someone with direct reports. All of a sudden, you could have been the great machinist, or you could be, the greatest operator. You could have been the greatest customer service rep, but like the technical ability doesn't translate directly to that managerial ability. And I think that when you talk about education, and it was one of the questions that I had for you, just in terms of like, what are all of the different things that you can get educated on? I think you highlighted many of those, which is, it's not only technical, it's all of the other things that make up what a professional is going to give back to their organization. And that's why I think, from an ALM perspective, but also just generally, education is so important to get on many different facets of what an employee brings to the table. Would you agree with that?
For sure. And I'm looking right here. I want to find one of my stats to kind of give you as a reference. Bear with me, because I think it was a little out of order from.
That's okay. As you're looking for that, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So new managers, right? This is according to SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, right? Mm-hmm. So we use them. It's another association. We look to them a lot because they focus on training and talent development. But a study that they did says that new managers are often ill prepared for their new role, right? Highlighting areas of decision-making, communication, and coaching gaps.
100%.
2/3 of frontline leaders felt unprepared for their role, according to another study that I just found. And what that means, right? Here's what the overall impact of that is organizations that make strategic investments in employee development have an 11% greater profitability.
Wow.
And are twice as likely to retain their employees.
Wow.
And that was a study that was done by Gallup poll.
Wow. Like, that's huge.
That's, when you think about it, like, it's crazy, right?
That is
huge. And you've got, and it touches on it in there, but that talent retention is huge. We can't afford to lose our people, right? And when I was an operator, especially like those frontline employees, like, we used to think it was normal, right, for those to just be a revolving door. Like, we had great turnover except for like these few positions, right? And that was just like a complete revolving door all the time. It doesn't have to be your norm, right? Mm-hmm. But you have to train the people. You have to train your frontline workers, right? They have to know what their expectations are. That's right. They have to know how to do the job. They have to know that common language. They have to be invested in it.
That's right.
And then the stakes get higher, right? As they continue to grow and get into different leadership positions.
Absolutely. And I think that we could talk about this topic forever, Sarah, and I know that this is what you live and breathe every single day. I'm curious, as we kind of start wrapping up a little bit, just how you see education changing. So I know technology is kind of pushing forward. If we look at even within the operations, AI, and now these machines are not just, belts and gears. There's a lot more that goes into this. So how is education changing to kind of stick with the ever-changing environment that the employees are working in?
Sure. So workforce development is always going to be there. It doesn't matter how much technology you have, or, how, what kind of the equipment that you have, AI, what role that plays. You're always going to have people, right? Your people, they tell you when you run a business, that your people are your largest asset. At ALM, we firmly believe that, right? So we are invested in the people in this industry. Right. And that means looking at every facet of what it is to make an employee stay in their role, trained for their role, right? And see that progressive path forward. We know that today's employees need to see that. They don't want to come in and punch a time clock, right? Even the frontline employees, they don't want to come in and just punch a time 100%. Clock, do a job, and go home. They want to know what that progressive career path looks like. And we want people to see that, right? Because we want them to stay. We want to help your retention numbers. We want to help the retention numbers of the industry as a whole, because if something happens and they don't work out with you, we want them to know that there are options elsewhere, right? That they have training, they have certification, that they can look to work for another organization other than your own without having to go into an entirely different industry.
And it's for me, it's an ever-changing curriculum, right? So it's kind of like what you're saying, that's kind of a living and breathing thing that kind of moves and changes as things change within our industry, as does the curriculum change. And the fact that you have the community, we'll go back to that first word that we used, that community actually giving back and doing the training as you used to do. I think that that's
Mhm.
what makes it so real for people, because it's not just a trainer that comes in that's been training the same way to do 1+1 = 2. It's now, okay, well, things have changed, chemistry has changed, machinery has changed, textiles have changed. So we're actually kind of moving forward as those things change. So, Sarah, I really,
Right.
yeah,
And we're
yeah,
constantly adapting
yeah,
our curriculum
yeah.
to do that. Now we're looking at our models as well.
Okay.
So it's beyond just the curriculum and what we're teaching. It's the way that we are teaching it.
That's so good.
And we're trying to just partner with organizations wherever they have gaps and help them fill in so that the employees have all of the
Okay.
pieces that they need to be
That's
successful.
so good. Well, Sarah, listen, if you have anything to close on, I'll kind of leave the floor to you if you have something that you want to share with the group. But this has been a great time. I really thank you for the time that we spent today. This was awesome. It's a good conversation.
It was
Yeah.
really good. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate it.